To someone driving this stretch of Route 52 in Mingo County, there's nothing to suggest the tragic crash that occurred here on May 1st, 2009. Even someone walking by the road could easily miss the gouges in the pavement. However, to a trained eye, these marks are a key piece of the puzzle in determining the fault in the offset head-on collision that occurred here. This crash involved a Chevrolet Impala being driven northbound by Billy Hinkle and a Dodge Avenger headed southbound being driven by Robert Ryan, or as he was known to his friends and family, Bobby. Unfortunately, Billy Hinkle died on impact, and while Bobby Ryan survived, the life that he loved died here too.
It was awesome having him as my dad. He was very outgoing. He worked at the fire department, so his shifts that he worked, he would be on for 24, off for 48. So we got to spend a lot of time with him. I was always in sports. He was always there for that. My sister also was in sports, and he was there. I mean, it was great. We always liked to just do, he was outdoorsy, so we liked to do all kinds of outdoors things with him. He was the one that taught us to ride bikes. He was the one, that would take us to baseball practice. If we were sick, he'd take us to the doctor. He loved to play. We had Nintendo, of course, when we were little. He loved to play our Nintendo. We would come home from school, and he'd have it all laying out, and he would have been playing it all day long. So, just normal things.
Bobby had the position of firefighter here in the fire department, and Bobby made lieutenant approximately I'm thinking it's somewhere in the mid-90s. Bobby was second in command unofficially. We don't have an assistant chief, but as part of our rules and regulations through the chain of command, Bobby being the oldest lieutenant in seniority was actually technically second in command. Before the accident, Bobby was my go-to guy. He was like my right hand. Bobby and I, by virtue of being such long-time friends and both sharing a similar philosophy with the fire service, Bobby was always the person I'd go to make sure that something got done here in the fire department.
Before the accident, Robert Ryan was an active father and grandfather. He was a respected veteran fireman for the city of Williamson. He loved to hunt and fish. He had been an umpire for a local baseball league for decades. Now he is incompetent and has gone from taking care of his aging mother to being dependent on her.
He said, "Your dad's been in an accident." He said, "It's bad. It's really bad." And I said, "Well, Joey," I was like, is he okay? What do I do? And he said, "Caitlin," he said, I'm not for sure if he's okay." He said, "I know that they're going to fly him out to Huntington." He said, "But I don't know anything more than that." And I said, "Well, what do I do?" And he said, "You need to get with your sister, and you need to get your mom, and you all need to get to Huntington as fast as possible." And they had already gotten the cars. My dad's car had went the other way, so it was up ahead of us. And then the other car actually passed us. And I saw a white sheet over that vehicle, and it was actually on a rollback. And when I saw that car, I didn't know for sure. You just assume that that's the vehicle, and I thought, there's no way, And once we actually got to the scene, there were just places in the road where, it was like part of the road was just gone. There was like, tire marks everywhere. There was glass. There was, just tons of stuff just laying everywhere.
Bobby Ryan was in Cabell Huntington Hospital for 9 days. He was in the Health South Rehabilitation Hospital for 2 months. He was in the Mountain View Healthcare Facility for 5 months.
It's been rough since the accident. In some ways, he's the same person, but in a lot of ways, he's not. He was very outgoing. He was the most anybody you ask, that's all, he was always on the go, always ready to help somebody, always there when other people needed help. He was a fireman for 28 years, and always, that will always be in my mind, being a little girl and watching my dad go off to a fire, and I knew that he was going to help other people, and since the accident, pretty much all he has is this house. He doesn't, I'll come get him and take him to the grocery store with me, or, he goes to doctor's appointments. Other than that, he's not able to do anything. He's not able to drive. He's not able to, he was really into four-wheeling and things like that. He doesn't get to do anything like that now. It's so different than what it was.
There was also several incidents that we've dropped the tones when we had fire practice one Thursday evening, and Bobby came running over here wanting to know, what kind of emergency we had, and really when he did that, that kind of sent up a red flag for me. I was concerned about what might happen next if he, was going to run over here after we dropped the tones for an emergency, and if we're all out and he comes in here, what might happen. And my greatest fears came true one day. We had a motor vehicle crash here in town, and we were all at the scene, and one of my lieutenants came to me and told me that Bobby had arrived on scene in one of our fire apparatuses, and that was a real scary incident there. It really made me mad. But again, I had to realize that Bobby wasn't in his right mind. I loaded him up in my vehicle and brought him back to his house, and I tried to explain to him as delicately as I could that I said, Bobby, you're just not clicking on all cylinders yet. You can't drive a fire apparatus. And he said, well, why not? You let everybody else. And I said, Bobby, you are not an employee of the fire department right now. He didn't understand. And I said, Bobby, you don't even get your check, your paycheck. It doesn't come from the city of Williamson. It comes out of the firefighters' retirement fund. You're on temporary disability. And Bobby just sat there and with his mouth open and just trying to soak in what I was explaining to him there, and it was just, it was sad. I was mad. He put the city in a position of liability there by doing that, and I was really mad at him. But at the same time, that's my good friend there that just doesn't have the same mind that he used to have. Yeah, I miss the old Bobby Ryan. I do. My wife and my mother, I can hold a grudge for a long time with them, but Bobby, I just couldn't. We would fight, argue, and it'd all be over an hour later. And that's a tribute to Bobby, not me.
Back in December of '09, this officer received a call from his family who had concerns about the ongoing impact of a brain injury that he had through a car accident. They were concerned that he was not able to meet his daily needs and wanted to know if I was able to do a guardian conservatorship evaluation. I explained to my credentials, and I could certainly do that, and we would perform a number of tests to assess what the impact was of these injuries and whether or not I felt comfortable making that recommendation of a guardian conservatorship. What we basically did is try to combine the results and overlap and give you a general functioning level for the guardian conservatorship. The test showed significant general memory impairment. This was consistent with the Cognizant, with the Wetzler memory scale, with the slums. Attention and concentration were very poor. His judgment and impulse control were poor. This came through actually the collateral interview with his daughter. I mean, he'd leave money around. He may walk out in the middle of the night with large large amounts of cash in an area that's not so safe in the neighborhood. What we found is his general memory was limited. His auditorial immediate memory was limited, and this is in the report. Immediate memory was limited. Auditorial delay memory, visual delay, auditory recognition delay, his planning ability, those were all delayed based on the reports. And they were all confirmed when you talk to his family. And really, if you spend any time with Mr. Ryan over a period of time, you will start to notice these deficits. For the first couple of minutes, he makes a good impression. But once you actually sit down with him and start to go over some things you may have talked to him about, you will start to notice his difficulty.
Like a 4-year-old, he would be able to get up and wash his face and brush his teeth and do his own activities of daily living. He would be able to move around the house, but don't let him put a pot of boiling water on the stove, because he would go off and forget about that pot of boiling water on the stove and come back and his friends may be putting out the fire in his own house. He would forget about that. His short-term memory is not adequate to allow him to be safe in an unsupervised situation. His daughter is now his mom. I don't know how I can put it any more clearly than that. He's no longer taking care of his daughter. He's no longer the dad. The daughter is now the one taking care of him. The roles have been reversed. Furthermore, he was the caretaker of his elderly mother. She's like 90-something years old. I mean, she's right up there. She is now in better shape than he is, so far as being able to care for herself and keep herself out of trouble. He may be physically more agile, but she's not going to be the one that's going to leave the boiling pot on the stove. He will be. So now the task falls to the daughter. The adult daughter is going to have to take care of Dad and Grandma. He had a fractured right ankle, closed head injury. Closed head injury is an antiquated term that should no longer be used. It should be traumatic brain injury, but that's unfortunately a lot of ER docs still use that old antiquated term. Left elbow fracture, right navicular fracture, that's a broken foot. Multiple low back fractures, compression fractures, iliac ring fracture, in other words, a broken pelvis, multiple rib fractures. I mean, the guy was pretty well, he was mangled. Of all of the injuries that he's had, all those orthopedic injuries, all the broken bones, all the contusions, all the soft tissue stuff, his worst injury by far, the thing that's going to keep him from going back to being the Robert Ryan that he was before, is his brain injury. There were 3 drugs found at the Cabell Huntington Hospital emergency room urine drug screen. The first one that was found was benzodiazepine. That is specifically midazolam, also called Versed. That's one of the medicines that they gave to him on board the helicopter on his way in, because that's part of the preoperative anesthesia medicine that we give to prepare somebody for being on a ventilator. He was also found to have fentanyl on board, which again is the opiate that was found in the drug screen that was given to him by the hospital ambulance helicopter crew, again in preparation for putting him on the ventilator. That's supposed to be there. That's what the ambulance helicopter crew gave him. They also found the oxycodone at normal therapeutic levels, because that's what was prescribed for him. A long time ago, it was not at an elevated level. It was simply there because that was the medicine that had been prescribed for him. It was at normal therapeutic level with nothing special about the dose at all. Study after study have shown quite clearly that this level of pain medication for the amount of time that he's been on, this particular pain medicine has no deleterious effect whatsoever on cognition or reaction time. There are state troopers in this state that drive with the same amount of medicine in them, and they drive fast and carry guns.
Although it pales in comparison to Bobby's loss of ability to live a life he loved, the financial impact is staggering. Over $237,000 in past medical expenses. Over $2,800,000 in future medical expenses. Over $407,000 in lost earnings. Total damages of over $3,400,000. The causes of this accident are simple. Billy Hinkle did not maintain control of his vehicle, keep his eyes on the road, stay in the proper lane. This accident was thoroughly investigated by the Mingo County Sheriff's Department, who determined that Billy Hinkle crossed the center line and struck Bobby Ryan. David Harris, a crash reconstructionist hired by Nationwide, believes that Billy Hinkle crossed the center line and struck Bobby Ryan. Nationwide asked Mr. Harris not to submit a written report. Kurt Tilley, a crash reconstructionist hired by the Underwood law firm, believes that Billy Hinkle crossed the center line and struck Bobby Ryan. The only person with a scenario for the crash being caused by Bobby Ryan is Dan Aerney. Dan was hired by Nationwide after David Harris, but Dan Aerney admits there is a 50-50 chance he is wrong.
Now I'm going to ask you to define the percentage of possibility of each call out of 100%.
All right. Let me refer you to the sketches that accompanied my report. And I'm going to refer you to sketch C, which is impact configuration per description in police report. I think there's virtually no chance of that one being accurate. I think between sketches D and E, you're looking at 50-50 for each. Or somewhere, basically you've got the same configuration in these two, but they've only been, but the location of impact has been shifted over toward the east edge of pavement between sketch D and sketch E. I believe that the configuration of the vehicles was something like that in sketch D or sketch E or somewhere in between.
It appeared that vehicle number 1 was traveling northbound on US 52, and that vehicle number 1 had crossed the center line, striking vehicle number 2 head on. In this officer's opinion, the gouge marks on the road that matched the left front tires on both vehicles indicated that vehicle number 2 attempted to get off of the west edge of the road to avoid a collision but was unsuccessful. The driver of vehicle number 1 was fatally wounded at the time of the crash, and the driver of vehicle number 2 was transported by ambulance to a landing zone and was flown to Cabell Huntington Hospital. The gouge marks was the biggest factor that determined who was at fault.
That is a scenario in sketch C which you believe reflects your opinion?
Correct.
And also reflects the accident reconstruction report of the deputies?
It reflects the accident investigation report by the deputies.
And also reflects the opinion of Mr. Tilley?
Correct. Like I say, the angle may be a little off. I'm not real, at this point in time, I'm not real concerned with that.
Okay. Because of other factors that support it?
Correct.
And would you show, it is 213-12, please? Also known as sketch D. That is another scenario of it occurring in the Ryan side of the road. And although you agree that it occurred on that side of the road, you don't believe that that angle is actually the proper one?
No.
Okay. And you think sketch D, sketch C is closer in point to the actual angle than this one?
Correct.
And would you bring up 213-13, please? Also known as sketch E. And this is Mr. Ernie's scenario wherein he has indicated that this is his opinion as to, or a possible opinion as to how it occurred on the Hinkle side of the road.
Didn't happen like that.
Okay, why, in your opinion, did it not happen like that?
First of all, there's nothing on the roadway over in this area to suggest that it happened like that.
Okay.
The angle of impact that he has there is very similar to sketch D, and that's not the correct angle of impact.
Yes.
He's also showing that the Avenger would have essentially done a 180. I'm sorry. It appears that he's showing it to have done a 360 plus a 180. or somewhere close to that in rotation. And there's no evidence indicating that.
And when you say there's no evidence indicating that, you base that on having reviewed the pictures of the scene, having appeared at the scene within 2 weeks of the actual accident, and having shot the scene as well.
Correct.
And also taking your own pictures.
Correct. At least I assume that's why he's got the circle in his line right there.
And how do you know that it is not the correct angle of impact?
Does not match up with the crush profiles.
And specifically, for it to have had that angle of impact, would you not have expected some type of bulge to occur on the driver's side quarter panel?
I would. That's exactly why I say it doesn't match.
Okay, and there is no bulge, is there?
No. You would expect, can you bring that up a little bit more? Okay, that'll work.
Can you show where you would have expected to see a bulge?
Sure. When you consider that this here is about the center line for that vehicle, he's showing that principal direction of force applied by the Impala to be going in the outboard direction, which is going to force the car parts in this general direction.
Yes.
And that's not how they're done.
Okay. In fact, there is no bulge on either vehicles, isn't that correct?
No, not like that. I mean, you've got, I'd have to go back and review some photos. On the Avenger, you may have some over on the passenger side, maybe a little bit, I don't recall off the top of my head, but nothing like what I would expect to see for this angle.
In reviewing Mr. Ernie's report, I came up with some questions. Mr. Ernie specifically shows two diagrams that he believes and says that one is more likely than the other. However, he says that he believes it could have been either way, but he lists one more likely. In doing so, he has a diagram where the impact occurred in the southbound lane, and he has a diagram where the impact occurred in the northbound lane. He believes more likely it's in the northbound lane and bases most of that belief on the debris evidence that he saw in two photos from the crash site. And I'll address the debris in a minute. The issue I have is if you look at his diagram showing the accident occurring in the northbound lane, he has the vehicles, one, impacting in such a way that the physical evidence of the vehicle does not coincide with the principal direction of force that he has for the Dodge Avenger. The evidence on the Dodge Avenger is clearly not the way that he describes the direction of force through that vehicle. But secondly, he has that vehicle then rotating and rotating counterclockwise, but rotating counterclockwise and then also coming southbound to come to its final rest position. The biggest issue, and it's clear right on his diagram, is that if the crash occurred in that manner, he disregards at least two, if not three, pieces of physical evidence, being gouge marks that are on the road, specifically on the roadway in the southbound lane, and has no explanation for how those got there. The vehicle would not even cross over those gouge marks, much less they be a result of impact. As I've stated earlier, a gouge must be. So in my opinion, it is impossible that the accident could have occurred in the way that he describes as the most likely scenario. Secondly, he talks about debris. I'm the instructor for all the law enforcement in the state of West Virginia in the at-scene traffic crash investigation. And that's teaching them to go to the scene, what to look for, and how to perform that initial crash investigation. the textbooks that I use, and everything that I've been taught and teach for over a decade now, is that debris is at best a secondary indicator on the point of impact. It cannot and should not be used primarily to designate an area as the point of impact. And there's many reasons for that. But I think that Mr. Ernie is just incorrect in using that debris as a basis for one being more likely than the other.
As you have heard, everyone but Dan Ernie firmly believes Billy Hinkle crossed the center line and caused this accident. Most believe he fell asleep. This is supported by the fact that he was at the Williamson ARH Hospital in Kentucky until 3:50 a.m. the morning of the accident with stomach problems. Later that morning, he drove from his home in Delbarton to the CVS pharmacy in South Williamson, Kentucky to pick up the medications he'd been prescribed. He was on his way home on Route 52 when he fell asleep, crossed the center line, and slammed into Bobby Ryan. In the end, there is only one way the evidence, the pieces of this puzzle fit together. Billy Hinkle crossed the center line and struck Bobby Ryan.